Hi, welcome to Professor Kev Show. You can see I got my friend Kaia with us from the scene. Hello, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Hi, super excited to be here.
So, before I jump in and talk about the scene, tell me a little bit about yourself as a human being. What should I know about you?
Well, my name's Kaia. I grew up in Australia and I'm 17 years old now, and I've been living in Portugal for the past 4 years. I'm about to graduate high school and will be moving to Scotland very shortly to go to university in St. Andrews, which I'm very excited about. And as I know, we're going to get into the scene, which is a podcast which I built. And recently, I've been working on building my own personal brand as well, specifically on LinkedIn.
So, let's talk about the scene. Tell us about what you're doing, why you started it, what opportunity, what need did you see?
So The Scene is a podcast I have, and I'm apologizing for my voice right now because I'm a little bit under the weather, so it's quite scratchy.
All right.
But The Scene is a podcast I started where I interview entrepreneurs about their journeys and how they became seen. And the reason I started it was just I was listening to all these podcasts online and going to all these business classes in school, but I found that the stories they were presenting were just these very polished, almost highlight reels of what entrepreneurship is. And I was like, well, this isn't quite right. And in my community, there's a lot of expats and a lot of entrepreneurs living here. And I was starting to hear these behind the scenes stories about about their own companies, and I was realizing that there was all these little interesting details about the early days and the raw stories that people didn't tend to share on LinkedIn or in the classroom talks or even on podcasts. And so I started the podcast just because I wanted to learn more about from these entrepreneurs about what it really takes to start a company and about the early days, the mistakes that they made and the strategies that they learned and how they adapted, because I find that those are the most interesting stories. And there's so much that you can learn about those stories and take away into your own companies.
I really love what you're doing because, like you said, with all the polished, I teach an entrepreneurship class at the university, and we all think because of Instagram and LinkedIn that you just come up with an idea and you're successful the next day,
Exactly.
and it's like, well, a lot of people don't make it that far and stuff. So it's nice that you're sharing that and stuff. So tell me about like some of the stories you've heard, at least pick one that like kind of stands out so people understand it's not that, just come up with the idea and it's gonna work type of thing.
One of my favorite, sorry, my voice is just getting worse by the second.
Right.
One of my favorite stories is from the founder of Pictionary, I'd have to say. And this was like a very special episode for me to record personally because I grew up playing Pictionary. And so when I managed to get this guest, it was just a big moment of like, wow, like I grew up using his product. I didn't even
Yeah.
know about him. And now I can interview him about it. And there was a really interesting story about the about how he built Pictionary was he was playing this game with his friends and they came up with this concept. And he was just a waiter. And for many years, he just had this concept, but he didn't turn it into a business. And he didn't even think about turning it into a business. And I think it took him 3 years, I want to say. And then he eventually decided that he was going to productize this. And he sat down in his backyard with a pen and a pencil and he just opened the dictionary. And for anyone who doesn't know how to play Pictionary, it's basically this word guessing game where you take a card and you have a word and then you have to draw it and people guess what it is. And so he went down in his backyard and he pulled out a dictionary and he just wrote down the first word in the dictionary, which was aardvark. And he just kept going and he made a list of all these words that he was going to include in this game. And then there's all these amazing stories that he had of like setting up a production line and ordering 1,000 game cards in. And at this point, like he didn't have any customers, and all the game cards came. I think it was 500,000 game cards for 1,000 units of the game.
Well,
They came and they were completely unorganized. And so him and his friends, they set up a production line in his apartment using these Nordstrom boxes, and they just had to hand sort these cards for like 10 hours a day for 6 days a week to launch on time. And it was just that was a really cool story.
how do you pick your guest?
I Sorry, I have a process. It's a couple of things. So sometimes I meet guests at networking events. Sometimes people will recommend guests to me, like guests that I have on the show. I'll usually ask if they have anyone they'd recommend. So it's sometimes that way.
Yep.
And other times just through people that I find online or I'll read an article about them or people that just sound like they have an interesting story to tell. And then I usually reach out. If I can find a warm intro, I'll do it that way. But I've been doing a lot more cold outreach lately. And just because
Mhm.
of all the LinkedIn growth that I've had, that's been a lot more successful for me right now.
Sure. So, last question, crystal ball. What are you hoping to accomplish with this idea in 3 to 5 years?
I'm really excited to see where it goes because I've only been doing this for, I launched in June or July. So it's been about 8 months now.
Yep.
And I'm just really hoping that I can start doing more of these interviews and just, I'm releasing them right now every other Friday. And I'm hoping to do that more often and doing it every week now. And hopefully turning it into a platform and into a community that people can really, that for young entrepreneurs to be able to find this advice from more successful entrepreneurs and be able to be in the rooms almost that they wouldn't have had access to otherwise.
That's awesome. What's the best way for people to reach out to you or actually to watch your show?
So LinkedIn is the best way to reach me. Kaia Tham, just Kaiatham. Send me a message there, send me a connection request with a note. That would be perfect, and I'll try and get back to you. Otherwise, to listen to the scene, it's SEEN, and just on Spotify or on YouTube, or just send me a note on LinkedIn and I'll get back to you.
Awesome. I appreciate you taking a few minutes calling the show. And as always, thanks for being my friend.
Thank you.